Hello and welcome to the Liberation Access Officer candidate hustings for the 2021 Manchester SU officer elections. Manchester Media Group, the UOM student media team, is hosting all of the elections this year. My name is Frankie and I'm a member of the student TV station Fuse TV, and I'll be hosting today. Just now, we just had the hustings for the women's officer candidates, and if you missed it, you can watch it back on the Mancune's Facebook page and the SU's Facebook and YouTube channels. Joining me today are 4 of the 5 candidates for the Liberation Access Officer role. These are Michael Turner, Leanne Gray, Kieran Brearley, Emily Bennett, and Christopher Meadowcroft, who is actually unable to attend today live due to tech issues, but he's pre-recorded his answers, which will be played during the stream. The Liberation Access Officer is the lead student championing equality, diversity, and liberation in the SU and university. This officer is responsible for working with underrepresented student groups, challenging the barriers and inequalities they face, and campaigning for meaningful change and a more equitable student experience for all students. To begin, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give an introductory speech about themselves and their manifestos. When their 2 minutes is up, I'm going to raise my hand to indicate they should finish the end of their sentence. So just to kick things off, Michael Turner.
Hi everyone, my name is Michael, my pronouns are he, him and his, and I'd like to be your Liberation and Access Officer. I'm running on 5 key pledges, making online learning more accessible for every student, no matter their needs, making the self-ID process easier for trans students, which is something that's significantly more complicated for undergrads, acknowledging the result of the pandemic on marginalised communities, which has had a disproportionate effect, running safe space events and activities, including forums, inclusive sports, on-campus celebrations of all the things that make us different. And finally, responding to the policy of university and government to ensure that politics of the day is representing and respecting our communities. I'm passionate about running campaigns that have tangible effects on students. In my undergrad uni, I spent 2 years as trans rep, 2 years as committee member of Student Action for Refugees, 2 years with Football versus Homophobia, and 1 year as the LGBT Society president. I've raised nearly £1,000 for local refugees and migrants and for local LGBT youth. I've worked on campaigns that have made safer street lighting with the women's rep, and worked with the BME rep to introduce intersectional forums for students of all abilities, genders, races, sexualities and backgrounds. I ran my own major campaign to introduce more gender-neutral toilets and implement free period products in all bathrooms. I also think it's important to have fun, as it is to have the foundations of access structures. I've run monthly intersectional events, a week of Eurovision events, and on-campus party events for all students. If you let me, I'll make sure to take on the hard-pressing issues facing students while providing you with an outlet to express yourselves. It's my number 1 priority to make Manchester a home for all students. So if you vote for me, you can make Manchester for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Now over to Leanne.
So I believe it's time to enact change for the benefit of the student body and create an environment where no student feels excluded on our campus. We can only have liberation when our experience on campus no longer depends on us looking past the ignorance that we experience due to things we cannot change. Whether that's our race, gender, or sexuality, everybody deserves to be heard and seen at our university. These are only things that make up part of who we are, but we deserve a campus which embraces our differences, not one which ignores our differences. And I will aim to address racial issues on campus and engage with international students. They pay the most money, and during the pandemic especially, I feel they have been let down. My main aims and priorities are to lobby to provide more hardship funding for students. Due to systemic issues, people from the LGBTQ+, BAME and disabled communities face far more issues and are more likely to experience economic hardship. This can cause withdrawal from courses, mental health issues and lower attainment. I will lobby for funding to prevent this. I will lobby for a more inclusive and understanding counselling service. Students have been in some ways failed by the counselling service, and often they are ignorant of religious barriers to counselling, as well as culture barriers and identity gender-related issues. On that note, I will also lobby for more gender-neutral toilets. I also aim to produce representative training to make the service more inclusive and accessible, and aim to increase the frequency that students can access this service. I will lobby for a decolonised and representative curriculum, and I want to uplift the voices of a variety of different academics, which I hope to address the attainment gap. I'll work with Decolonise ULM. They do amazing work, but I still feel like there's a lot that needs to be done for the benefit of students. And I will also organise representative history months for Black, ethnic minority, LGBTQ+, and disabled students. I feel often these history months talk about the struggles instead of the joyous things that we experience in our communities, respectively.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you. Next, can we hear from Kieran, please?
Hey, I'm Kieran, and I'm a third-year psychology student. I've been one of the LGBTQ+ PTOs and an NUS delegate for the past 3 years. And through that, I've got great hands-on experience with the inner workings of the SU. So what would a vote for me look like? If elected, I will implement a UOM safer sex scheme, aiming to improve students' understanding of safe sex practices. This will include working to get free contraception, such as condoms and dental dams, rolled out across campus. Also, I will organise pop-up STI screenings, alternative lecture series that focuses on safe sex practices, STI education and consent, all of which will be pulled together in my proposed annual Safe Sex Conference, where any student can come for free sexual health advice and network with sexual health charities. Working alongside the Women's Officer, I will combat the ongoing sexual assault crisis we face. Initiatives such as Reclaim the Night have been amazing in previous years for bringing recognition to the problems faced by women and minority groups on and around campus. I will work alongside our PTOs to implement support groups and socials for our students, providing a safe space to speak freely about problems they face. I will also ensure that regular forums are held with each liberation group to allow everyone the representation they deserve in Senate. In recent years, amazing work has been done by a Decolonise UOM campaign, and it is important that we keep this work going alongside our BME part-time officers. The pandemic has highlighted how unequipped the university is for providing sufficient online content for all students. In particular, the university has failed to support DAS students, and this is something that desperately needs to be addressed. If elected, I will work closely with the education officer to open communication channels with university staff to address the problems with online learning, and I will also be sure to keep students included in these discussions. Gender-neutral bathrooms are a necessity in public spaces, and if elected, I will work to lobby the university to provide students with more gender-neutral spaces. I will also work with the trans PTOs to use our platforms to spread awareness of their need. Thank you, and vote Kieran for Liberation and Access.
Thank you, Kieran. Now can I hear from Emily, please?
Everyone, I'm Emily. My pronouns are she, her, and I study politics, philosophy, and economics. Witnessing the events of the past year as a president of a Halls committee was what really motivated me to run in this election. In semester one, when Halls reps were basically the only people that senior leadership would talk to, I spent a lot of time talking to students both inside and outside of my in an attempt to represent the views of as many people as possible. And the group effort by everyone resulted in both the accommodation pledge and then the rent reduction. And that's why I think engagement with students is really important and is one of my key manifesto pledges. The second pledge in my manifesto focuses on welfare. So some of the policies in that are a rent cap for disabled students who are forced to pay high prices for accessible rooms in halls, and also the introduction of specific wellbeing policies for each underrepresented group, and free sanitary products available to everyone on campus and in halls. Lastly, I would fight for a more accessible and inclusive by supporting the Decolonise Curriculum campaign and making sure that the momentum around it isn't lost, and making sure that online resources are available, but are accessible, for example, with alt text and transcripts, which shockingly are not always available even 6 months into online learning. Something else I think is really important, but sometimes is overlooked in this role, is the access and widening participation part of it. Coming from a state school in the Northwest and being eligible for widening participation programs, I found that Manchester was actually quite poor in what they offered, and I'd like to see things like an open day travel bursary for people who can't afford to travel to open days, and also the universities offer things like Sutton Trust programs which champion social mobility. If you want to know more about my specific manifesto points, please go and have a look at it, and feel free to ask me more questions on my Instagram, which is at emmybennett27. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. We're now going to hear from Christopher's pre-recorded speech since he can't be here today.
Hiya, my name is Christopher Meadowcroft. My pronouns are he, him, and I am running to be your Liberation and Access Officer this year. I'm running for this role because I think this is really important for every single student's uni experience. When I came to uni, the policies in place for trans students and disabled students totally made my life a lot easier and has made it so that I've had a really enjoyable uni experience. Unfortunately, a lot of these policies haven't gone far enough to ensure that every student has a liberating uni experience. And I think it's really important that we make Manchester a place that every student can thrive and feel liberated. My key pledges on my manifesto are to ensure the mitigating circumstances policy stays accessible as possible, as they've brought in that you don't need a medical note because of the pandemic, but I don't think this should be reinstated as it creates more issues. Continue previous officers' work at lobbying to decolonise the curriculum. This is really important to have a more diverse curriculum and to make sure that students of colour feel welcomed. I also want to continue pushing for gender neutral toilets and sanitary bins in all toilets on campus. Not just this, but I think it'd be really useful to have a map showing where gender neutral toilets are available, so it's not that students who need these are stuck trying to find them. I also want to make accommodation more accessible for disabled students. For example, there are other unis that when applying for accommodation ask if you'd like to be in a quieter space. This could be really useful for students who have sensory issues, and also being more transparent about accessibility options that are available, such as lifts and rooms big enough that they can have fridges to hold medication.
Thank you, Christopher, if you're watching this live, even though you can't be here today. Now it's time for some questions submitted by the student body themselves. So here, each candidate will have 30 seconds to answer, after which I'm going to raise my hand again and indicate that it's time to wrap up. So the first question, which is for Leanne, if you're okay answering first, is what are your thoughts on the experiences of students from underrepresented groups studying during the pandemic in relation to the university's policies and support during this time? Questions is at the bottom if you missed that from me.
So as I said before, I understand that a lot of these students can face economic hardship, and I feel like the university have not addressed this. I think they have expectations that are very unrealistic, that all students will have access to internet and all students will be able to access the lectures. Often they aren't closed captioned, which is very it's inaccessible, and often students are watching lectures at 1 a.m. in the morning if they're in different countries, which again makes them inaccessible. I think the university have honestly failed in this respect to make their courses accessible for students, and of course we pay for this, so we're all entitled to our education.
Oh, perfect timing. Nice one. Can we hear from Emily, please, next?
Yeah, I agree with what Leanne said about how disabled students particularly, I think, have suffered with online learning, with a lot of materials not being fully accessible, with closed captioning, transcripts, alt text. And also, I think the university's exam pledge did bring some positive change with the removal of needing like medical diagnosis for extenuating circumstances, but I think that there's no reason to get rid of that, and that should be carried on.
Awesome, thank you, Emily. We're now going to hear from Christopher's pre-recorded answer again.
The past year of university has been really hard. The move to online learning has brought with it its own specific new challenges, such as access to internet connections and accessing support that we can normally find available on campus, like counselling support and SU advice. This has really impacted underrepresented groups at university especially, because these are the groups that often need that support more than others.
Awesome. Thank you again, Christopher, if you're watching. Now can we hear from Michael?
Yeah, I think basically the university is completely failed in appropriately treating the needs of students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Particularly, I know LGBT students and students from maybe abusive backgrounds come to university to create a new community and find a new family for themselves. There's been no way for students to access those kind of social groups. As the comment said about disabilities, closed captions and stuff, this manuscripts available for lectures just hasn't been there. And also for international students, a lot of them haven't been allowed to change seminars to more appropriate times in their countries for them to be able to access the lectures. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And last but not least, can we please hear from Kieran?
So yeah, basically, I don't think that the university has handled the pandemic that well at all. They've really failed students with like accessibility wise, like the closed captioning, the fact that it's all done with Zoom. Zoom's not a very accessible platform to begin with. There's plenty of other more applicable platforms, and yeah, it's not the accessibility to transcript and time. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so for our next question, which is actually going straight back to you again, Kieran, what are the main ways that you feel the university could improve diversity and inclusion? And what are your ideas for tackling these? So whenever you're ready.
I mean, in general, the university. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Do you want me to come back to you at the end?
It's fine.
Let's come back to Michael. Sorry, back to Kieran at the end, if that's all right. So, Kieran, if you're happy to answer after everyone else has answered, we'll give you another go if you're happy with that. You're doing really well so far. Keep it.
Yeah, dude, awesome. That was a bit harsh jumping back straight to you again. Sorry about that. So again, what are the main ways that you feel the university can improve diversity and inclusion and your ideas for tackling these? Can we go to Michael, if that's okay for you to go?
Yeah, I agree with the principles of decolonise UOM. I strongly believe that a lot of the reading lists are very centred towards cis white people, able-bodied people. I think we could do more to encourage more sections in the modules to feature people who might not be the majority in the class, because I think that's the biggest way that you see change is by educating people in ways that they didn't think that they needed educated in.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. Can we hear from Leanne, please, next?
So while I've been at university, I've heard the most prolifically that people feel like there's a lack of community. And I think that stands for all marginalised groups. It exists in the academic syllabuses, in our reading list, and it also exists on campus. I feel like often the university don't make enough of an effort to represent LGBTQ plus groups, diverse groups, marginalised groups, ethnically. They don't make an effort, and I really would lobby to change that. I've heard so much frustration about it, and I really do think it's time to represent our country as a whole in the way that we run our university.
Awesome. Thank you, Leanne. Can we now hear from Emily, please?
I think that we need to listen more to minority groups and stop stop grouping them all together and actually talk to each group individually, do research into what each group faces, and publish wellbeing policies for each specific group. A few weeks ago in Senate, a Black students' wellbeing policy was passed, and obviously this needs to be implemented. And I think that different ethnic minority groups need one as well, and I think that all other undergraduate groups need some policies because they could be really effective if they are introduced effectively to the university.
Perfect, thank you, Emily. We're now going to hear from Christopher's pre-recorded answer.
I think one way that the university can improve diversity and inclusion is by having underrepresented groups leading the SU forward. This is one of the reasons I'm running for Liberation and Access Officer. I'm a trans student and disabled student, and I know how when these policies fail us it hurts, and how when they succeed it can be a brilliant experience for students. We need someone that's going to listen and relate to underrepresented groups' experiences, and I think I can do that.
Awesome. Kieran, if you'd like to answer now, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you. Yes, so like I said in my introduction, I want to do a lot of work with student sex workers and different marginalised groups. I've had experience over the past 3 years that have shown me how excluded minority groups can feel in education, especially at university level. And initiatives such as like Decolonise UOM has highlighted like how much the syllabus needs to change, and the room for change that there is.
Awesome, thank you. So for the next question, it'd probably be beneficial for me to say the order that I'm going to be asking you guys so I don't spring anything on you again. So I'm going to be asking Leanne first, then Emily, then we're going to hear from Christopher, then Michael, and then Kieran last. So the question is, what student issue do you feel has been overlooked or neglected in the past year because of the focus on the pandemic? So Leanne, whenever you're ready, let's hear from you.
I don't think it's representative to just look at it in the past year. I think we need to look at more of the heritage of it and understand that these issues have continually been ignored. And the pandemic has rather just kind of pushed them aside further. I would say the main thing for me is the lack of community and the lack of addressing the historic issues such as, the issues that a lot of people face seeking counselling, the issues that people face seeking sexual health advice. They have just been kind of ignored further, but they've always been ignored, in my opinion.
Fab. Thank you, Leanne. We're now going to hear from Emily.
I think that the pandemic has really exacerbated the problems, kind of putting the students to the Students' Union and the university. I think that the issues that have been raised have been really important, and students haven't known where to turn when they've had issues, and they've needed the attention of the Students' Union to make change and the university. So I think that there needs to be more ways for students to kind of get in touch with the Students' Union and the university.
Awesome, thank you, Emily. We're now going to hear from Christopher.
With the focus on the pandemic, certain groups of students have been overlooked, such as those that cannot access Wi-Fi in their homes, those that don't have a safe space or a quiet space to do uni work, and those that are still away from Manchester and they cannot access texts that they need from the library. This is especially important for third year students, where this is the most important year of their degree, and the things that they need to engage with their learning has been completely overlooked.
Awesome. Can we now hear from Michael whenever you're ready?
Yeah, I don't believe there's been one specific issue that's been overlooked, but I think conversations on race, on sex workers, on sexual harassment have gone quite quiet because of the pandemic. And I think it's all been exacerbated by, as I say in my manifesto, the ways that the pandemic has disproportionately affected people in marginalised communities.
Awesome, thank you, Michael. And can we hear from Kieran, please?
And so yeah, I think that the main the main way in which students have been overlooked in the past year has been with regards to mental health and accessibility to mental health support. Obviously, with everyone being off campus at the moment, then it's all relying on there being a suitable online mental health support route, but that's just not in place, and it's something that needs to be worked on within the university in general.
Awesome, thank you, Kieran. So for the final question of today, I'm going to be asking this in the order of Michael first, then Leanne, then Kieran, then Emily. Then we're finally going to hear from Christopher's pre-recorded video to finish it all off. So the last question, which will also be along the little bar at the bottom, is as follows. The role of the Liberation Access Officer encompasses a huge range of areas, from LGBTQI issues to disabled students, to addressing racial inequality and everything in between. What is one major social issue or campaign that is particularly close to your heart and the one that you would like to address? Can I hear from Michael whenever you're ready?
Yeah, I believe in taking intersectional approaches to everything. So a lot of the work I've done in the past has been in campaigns that have included everybody. But for me personally, I think, you know, the trans campaign that I've mentioned in my manifesto has been most important to me, because I know personally how important that is to a lot of students that really need it at the minute.
Awesome, thank you, Michael. Can we now hear from Leanne, please?
So an issue that would be close to my heart would be, firstly, decolonising the curriculum. I think I hear about this issue the most, and it really just hurts sometimes to understand that you work so hard to get into university and you arrive and there's not a space for you. And I think that's really close to my heart, but I do genuinely care about all of the other issues. And I really would work to try and understand more deeply and intricately the way that I can change, you know, in ways that I feel like we've all been failed as marginalised groups on our campus. So I think it's hard to say that just one thing would be very close to my heart, especially since I have experienced racial profiling on the campus. You know, it's difficult to say just one thing.
Awesome, thank you, Leanne. Can we now hear from Kieran whenever you're ready?
Yes, I think it was quite evident from my introduction that sexual health is a big one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and in particular, like, awareness of safe sex, and that's like one of the main things that I'm going to be focusing on. Like Michael said, intersectionality is very important in liberation work, and it is something that is going to be brought into everything that I do, if you'll let me.
Awesome, thank you, Kieran. Can we now hear from Emily, please?
Obviously, I agree with everyone else about how important intersectionality is, because obviously everyone has a lot of different identities that intersect with each other, and experiences are different based on those intersections. But as I mentioned in my first speech, I think that the access, unwinding, participation part is really important, and I think that it's something that's quite overlooked. So that's one big thing that I would try and push more than is currently being pushed.
Awesome, thank you, Emily. Lastly, we're going to hear from Christopher.
One issue that is particularly close to my heart is the university's treatment of trans students. In the wider world, it feels like transphobia is only getting worse in this country. Only a few days ago, the maternity bill was changed to only protect women specifically, not including trans men or non-binary people who give birth. It feels like not enough people know about the struggles that trans people face, and I want to make sure that the university is a liberating and accepting place for all trans students.
Okay, fab. Thank you all so much, guys, for giving smashing answers. Yeah, big thank you to all of you guys campaigning for the Liberation Access Officers. You can find their full manifestos at manchesterstudentunion.com/elections. Voting for full-time, part-time and NUS officer elections, as well as senior leadership vote of no confidence referendum, opens at 10 a.m. on Monday, the 8th of March. Don't miss your chance to have your say. Thank you very much. That's all from us today.